Welcome into the Jazz Notes podcast. I'm Ben Anderson.
I'm Chandler Holt.
Fun to have us both back together. We've been kind of alternating for over a month now, right? We just kind of haven't been in the same room. So appreciate everyone who's stuck with us and listened for the last 4 episodes. It's been a little bit different, but excited. This is the right time to be back together in the same room podcasting, as it is June 25th, one day before the NBA draft. I love the NBA draft, so this is always a very exciting time for me. And instead of our usual podcast where we'll talk about, Jazz news and notes and whatever's happening, because there's not that much, we're just going full mailbag. We got at least 9 questions already. By the time we're done recording this, there might be more. And I think it's long enough and there's enough draft stuff that it's worth dedicating an entire mailbag, an entire podcast to answering your questions. And I think, Chandler, first of all, if you want to respond to us, you can find us on Twitter, at KSL Sports, at Ben's Hoops, at Chandler Holt KSL. KSL Sports is found on TikTok, Twitter, X, Threads, Instagram, whatever you want. Tomorrow night, we're going to be having a full coverage on the Zone 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone, starting at 6 o'clock, but really it's going to be a lot of draft coverage leading up to that. Me, Jake Scott, Coach Steve Cleveland, former BYU coach, former Fresno State head coach, was Paul George's coach. I can't tell you how cool it is to talk to Paul George's former coach on draft night and how fun it is to have his perspective of these players. So really, really cool to have Steve Cleveland on that as well. So tune in all night. I promise you, it's the best coverage. No one's worked harder. No one knows basketball better than Steve Cleveland. It's going to be the best coverage there is available. So if you want a very Jazz-centric focus on the draft, listen to us. I promise you it's good. It was really good last year. And then we got to talk to all the players last year kind of one-on-one individually after they called the show. So it's cool. I'd appreciate it if you tuned in. I think you will like it if you're a Jazz fan. I promise you it's geared towards you. So I would recommend that tomorrow night, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone, 1280 if you don't get 97.5. And, of course, you can listen on the app. All right. That's my pitch. Let's get into the questions, including we have one of someone requesting we do a mock draft.
Yes. Do you want to do the mock draft one first?
Yeah, Utah Jazz News says, could you two alternate teams and do a quick mock draft and see the guys left on the board for the Jazz, and who would you take out of those guys? We'll go through the lottery. Yeah, I don't need to go down to 29. That's a lot of players. We could be here all day if we wanted to do that. And then just a quick plug, I did put out my own mock draft yesterday. It's kind of the only one I do, but I'm happy to use that as my basis for this as well, and we can talk about the players. Do you want to go number 1? Do you want to go... number 2, doesn't matter to me.
How about you start with number 1?
All right. I'm going to buck the trend. I think Alex Sarr is the best player in the draft.
Okay.
And I was told by an executive one time, it's lying season. Remember, people are lying to you. Everything you hear right now is a lie. So this idea that Atlanta hasn't seen Alex Sarr, well, they've watched him for 4 years.
Yep.
And he was in the G League 2 years ago. And he played against the G League Ignite in the first game of kind of a practice game when he was playing for Perth this year. And then they've probably seen him 10 times in Australia. They've seen him. They don't care if they didn't work him out for 2 hours one day. Who cares? They'll draft him. If he's the best player, you draft him. And the way the NBA is going, it's long, rangy defenders who can step out and shoot the three. It's that's who he is if he hits. If everything goes together right for Alex Sarr, he defends multiple positions, including the rim, which is the most important defensive position, and then can put the ball on the floor and also looks like he's going to be able to shoot the ball, and I kind of believe he's going to be able to shoot the ball. So I don't think there's a question to me. I would take Alex Sarr number 1, and I'm telling you, I still think that's going to be the case.
Yep.
I think it's going to happen. Hey, there's a reason why at the draft lottery, they were showing Alex Sarr over and over. That didn't change. He didn't get worse over the last month and a half. He's still the best player. I'm telling you, I think it's going to be Alex Sarr.
No, I remember when the Hawks won the lottery, it was they're expected to take Alex Sarr. That was the reports that came out. And then as it got closer to the draft, I feel like exactly like you were saying, it's lying season. They're trying to throw people off of their trail. I think if you're in the top, especially 3 or 5, you don't want to show your cards in the NBA draft. So I agree with you. I think that Alex Sarr, it's a 1 and 2 race. And with that said, number 2, Washington Wizards. Help me out here. Zachary Riza-Shai.
Riza-Shai.
Okay.
Yeah, so Riza Shea, or sachet, Riza-Shai.
Okay.
Riza-Shai.
Okay.
That's a good way to remember it. Yeah. Zachary Riza-Shai. Again, where is the NBA going? Big wings who can defend multiple positions and shoot.
Yes. He's 6'9". He just turned 19. Granted, not even 200 pounds yet, so that's something that a lot of these rookies got to work on. But, he can shoot. He's versatile.
Yeah.
He has it all.
Yeah. He's not great with the ball in his hands. But it's fine. You're going to find a role for him in the NBA. I'm with you. I've got him going number 3
okay.
Because I know the Wizards on my mock draft. But not because he's not the second best player in this draft.
Yep.
And honestly, he's one of the guys I haven't done a deep dive on because there's no chance he goes to the Jazz. It would just be honestly a waste of my time. I have watched a couple of his games, including one of them live, which is not my favorite way to watch games. I like to watch it a little bit more slowly. But Reza Shea 2 to the Wizards. All right, number 3 in the draft, Houston. A lot of people think this is where the draft actually gets started. I will go here, what's kind of expected as chalk. It's probably the guy I would draft, honestly, number 1 overall if I were drafting, and I'll just take Reed Sheppard.
Okay, yeah.
He's the best shooter I've ever seen.
That makes a lot of
at the
sense.
college level, 52% from 3 on 4.5 attempts, 2 steals. He's just a playmaker, super cerebral.
Yes.
He's just going to find a way. And I know they're like, oh, what's his upside? I'm like, all-star. He's got
definitely.
Guys who make shots at a 50% rate from 3 make all-star teams.
Yes.
Because nobody makes them at that high of a rate. And even if they don't, fine. There's 10 options to get him on the floor if he's making plays defensively, even if he's not a great one-on-one defender. We overrate that a little bit sometimes. Can you play a team system and then also just bang threes on the other end? Okay, I'll figure that out. I went back and looked at the 2006 draft today. And it was Andrea Bargnani went number 1. It was terrible. And LaMarcus Aldridge went 2. It was a good pick. Paul Millsap was in that draft. Was great. And everyone I remember hammering the Orlando Magic for taking J.J. Redick, number 11. And J.J. Redick is not the same quality of shooter that Reed Sheppard is. And I'm not just doing this because they're little white guys, but isn't a good passer, couldn't dribble the way Reed Sheppard is. And J.J. Redick legitimately might be the 5th best player from that draft.
Yeah.
So relatively safe bet that he's going to stick. And in this draft, that's important. And I do think he has some star upside. So Reed Sheppard, number 3.
A couple of things with this. One, I've seen a lot of rumors about the 3rd pick getting traded, whether it be Houston just moving down a couple picks or maybe buying a little bit. But also for Reed Sheppard specifically, people are just oh, he's a great shooter. He's so much more than that. He's a very underrated defender and playmaker. Can't be that underrated if you're a consensus top 5 pick.
Yeah, right. But you're right. I think people are selling a little short that he's more than just a spot-up shooter. In fact, he shoots off the dribble. He's just awesome. I love the way he passes. I love Reed Sheppard.
Number 4 for the Spurs, I have them taking a guard. I'm just going to go with Stephon Castle, right? One of the best shades of Drew Holiday kind of player. He's a really good defender, needs to get his shooting up there a little bit. But a defensive duo of Castle and Wembanyama, that sounds ridiculous.
My only fear is that he doesn't shoot very well. Like you said, that's Wemby actually doesn't shoot that well yet. His 3-point percentage, I think it will come along. We saw him hit a lot of threes, and it got a lot better late in the season. But I just want Wemby to have as much shooting around him as possible. The problem, and that's where either Reed Sheppard or Zachary Reza-Shea would be perfect. They're just off the board.
Yep.
And that's why I actually think there is some interest if maybe they could move up to 3 and guarantee themselves one of those players. That would be really interesting. And they've obviously got the ammo to do it if they want to. That wouldn't surprise me if they'd move up. But a lot of people think Castle's the best player in this draft.
Yep.
So you get Castle, and you have 2 really elite defensive players. Castle's great in the backcourt. And obviously, Wemby's going to win 5 Defensive Player of the Year awards, if not more, in his career. So I think that's a great base. He's also the guys who come from UConn and play from Dan Hurley are Spurs guys.
Yes.
He just has that I know how to listen to authority and I can fall in line. And you know what? Stephon Castle was number 2 to Donovan Clingan already. He was already was ready to defer to the other big guy on the team. So that's where I went on my mock too.
Yep.
And I think that's right. Stephon Castle.
For the mock, we're not doing any trades, but I agree with you. I think that the best case for the Spurs is trading up for Reed Sheppard.
If they could get up to 3, I think that would make a lot of sense. I'm totally with you. Again, you know what? I'm just telling you, this draft could be crazy. Reed Sheppard could go number 1. I'm not kidding you at all. I know there's kind of this consensus idea. Just don't be surprised if someone says, dude, he shoots 50% from 3. That's what we want. Just don't be shocked if something crazy, crazy, crazy happens. But I'm with you. I think that would make sense. And Reed Sheppard would be the best player for San Antonio in this draft. All right, coming in at number 5, Detroit. They end up at number 5 again, despite having the worst record. Really tough. A lot of people think they're going with Modest Buzelis here. You know what? I'm going to buck this trend a little bit. I'm going to throw it off a little bit just because I think it's interesting and I think they could go this way. I know they drafted Jalen Duren. I'm going to go with Donovan Clingan.
Okay.
I just think you kind of need an identity. And Donovan Clingan, I have more concerns about him than a lot of people, but he's 7'3", he's 280 pounds. He's probably the best rim protector in the draft. He's better at it than an Alexander Sarr is. So just plant him in the middle and have something to start building around. Just have something to start formulating. He can do a lot offensively. You can pass him the ball. He's a decent passer out of it. He scored at a high rate at UConn, even though his points weren't that high because he only played 20 minutes a game. That's actually my biggest red flag for him. He only played 20 minutes a game, and I want to know why was he not playing 30? Because a guy we will talk about later, Zach Edey, played 40 minutes a game and is bigger than him. So why was why were you only getting 20 minutes a game out of Donovan Clingan? But I'm going to take him number 5 overall, just to kind of establish an identity in Detroit that they badly need. And then they can trade these other guys.
Yes.
You can trade Jalen Duren. You can trade whatever you want.
Unfortunate for the Hornets, I think they would love Clingan.
Yeah, I think so too. Yep.
But for them, I'm just gonna go with Cody Williams. It was between Williams and Buzelis for them, but I just think that Williams would fit a little bit better alongside Brandon Miller.
I like Cody Williams a lot. He's kind of one of the guys that say, like, if he hits, it could be a Paul George thing where people are like, he just wasn't all that aggressive all the time, and I don't know about the ball in the hand stuff, but all like the physical tools are there. I'm not comparing him to Paul George, but like the guys who could really spike, he could really spike.
Yeah.
So you have to the Hornets at number 6, Cody Williams. All right, coming in at number 7. This is a tough spot.
Yes.
For the Portland Trail Blazers, even though I think they just go with the best wing shooter, and that's Dalton Knecht.
Yep.
Like, I actually think they probably make that decision pretty quickly. I have them mocked to Cody Williams in my mock that I did yesterday, but Dalton Knecht shoots, steps in. They just don't need another project.
Yep.
Like, Scoot's a project. DeAndre Ayton is 7 years in the league and is still a project somehow. You gotta get some guys who can play. They need to play.
Yes.
They need someone who can make Chauncey Billups' life a little bit easier as a head coach, even though I don't think he'll be there next year or after next year. Dalton Knecht, number 7.
Who do we give to the Spurs at 4?
They ended up with Steph Castle.
Okay. You know what? Let's do Buzelis here.
Okay.
Right. They already took a guard. Right. They have their center of the future. Let's get a wing in there with upside.
Again, this is the hard part about this draft, which is like, Knecht would make sense because he can shoot. Again, we talked about how much shooting they need. Like, Buzelis did not shoot well last year, and now he shot really well as a senior in high school, but that was 1 year of shooting well.
Yep.
And he shot poorly before that, and then he shot poorly last year. But like, this is a very realistic pick that Buzelis is 4 on their board or 5 on their board. Say 5, because they have the 4th pick, and he just slips to 8, and they're just like, well, he's the best player available. He's got some pretty intriguing physical tools, so he ends up going number 8 overall. Number 9, the Memphis Grizzlies, and this obviously sets up where the Jazz are. Memphis needs a big guy. I don't think they're going to reach on Zach Edey at this point. I just don't think they will. But I wouldn't rule it out. Like, if you like him, draft him. Or if you like Khalil Ware from Indiana, draft him. And we could see this is where the draft could get really weird. They also may like the idea of being able to trade Marcus Smart at some point, and you can do that by picking up another guard. And I'll just take the guy who everyone says has had the best pre-draft process. He kind of has the junkyard dog mentality, and he steps in and just kind of gives them a little bit of a grown-up in the room, even though that's what Marcus Smart was originally brought in for. I'm going to go with Devin Carter.
Okay.
With Providence. I'm a little skeptical on Devin Carter, which means the Jazz are going to draft him tomorrow. That's just kind of always how it happens. And that's, I don't care who they draft, whatever. I hope he's fun to cover. I hope he makes easy stories. But like, Devin Carter's shooting, it looked great last year, like the overall number, but he hadn't shot well before that ever. And then last year he shot like 50% in November, 30% in December, and like 45% in January and 29% in February. It's like, even within the season, it was a roller coaster. So I'm just like, man, I don't know about the shot. And if the shot doesn't go in and he's just little and he's not a natural point guard, it's like, okay, you've got a little guy who's not a point guard who doesn't shoot. Well, okay, those guys actually aren't that hard to find. In fact, give me a big guy who's not a point guard who, like, that's where I think you're fine just having Chris Dunn on the roster.
Yes.
Like, ugh. And you're taking him at 10? Like, I get it. If he shoots, it's a totally different story. Imagine if Chris Dunn could shoot.
Yeah.
Now, Devin Carter's not as big as Chris Dunn, but he has a 6'9" wingspan and has those, like, kind of defensive chops, just kind of like gets it on the defensive end the way Chris Dunn does. And if Chris could really shoot, and I don't mean Chris shoots 38% on 2 a game, I mean 6 a game at 35 to 40%. That I totally get Devin Carter in that sense. You just really got to believe that shot's going to go in. And apparently it has the entire pre-draft, so that's a good sign for him. Number 9, Devin Carter. And that leads a wide open board for the Jazz.
Yes.
I actually think this is pretty advantageous. This is why we did this process to get here.
I was about to say, let's do this one together. For me,
There's looking like 5 names still that could go here.
Yes. For the guards, I think there's mostly guards to look at. Ron Holland, Rob Dillingham, Nikola Topic.
I think so too. I think those are the names that I would throw out there. Let me look really quickly at my own mock just to think who else might be in this conversation that we haven't picked that would have slipped. Yeah. It's kind of the general top 9, top 10, top 11. I don't think Tristan da Silva's in the conversation at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Tijon Salon's in this conversation,
Yes.
absolutely. So I would say it's between Salon, Ron Holland, Rob Dillingham, and Nikola Topic.
Yep.
Let's just break them down really quickly.
Yes.
Tijon Salon's kind of the highest upside swing of maybe of anybody in the draft. 6'10", incredible physical tools. He's a good athlete. He's not the best athlete in the draft, but he's like a very good athlete.
If there's a Giannis in this draft, I think it's him.
It's him for sure.
Yeah,
it is him. Shot the ball a little bit. His percentages are not good, but like you could watch him and realize like, oh, he can shoot. He really came on throughout the season. Like he wasn't in the rotation to start the year, and by the end of the season in the playoffs, he had like a full role. So he's kind of this late developer. He mostly just stood in the corner and shot threes. They didn't really give him the ball and ask him to operate, where like that's all that happened for Ron Holland at the G League Ignite. So understand that just like the context is just like one was forced to do it and one wasn't allowed to do it because they were on a team that was trying to win games and was winning games in Europe. And they're both 18. They're both younger guys. I think Salon's that young. Maybe he's a little bit older, but like really young. Salon's fascinating. And what I like about him is he like loves basketball. Yep. You can tell he just like is fiery. He's like always screaming. that type of stuff matters to me. So I like Salon quite a bit. Ron Holland is probably, I would say, the favorite amongst Jazz fans.
Yep.
When I just kind of checked Twitter, was at one point the number one recruit in his high school class. Was just absolutely forced into the wrong role with the G League Ignite.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's kind of funny because all four of these guys are sort of swinging for the fences kind of picks, but I would say that Ron Holland is like the surest thing of them.
Okay.
Because you don't know how, like Rob Dillingham is a absolute highlight machine, right?
Yep.
But you don't know how well that's going to translate. And then there's the injury stuff for Topic.
Yep.
And then Saloon is so raw.
Saloon's so raw. Holland, I love his defensive motor. He's got to play the right position, but you got to take the ball out of his hands. And then you got to hope he responds by not having the ball in his hands anymore. How does he do there? Topic is the smartest player, maybe in the entire draft, and the Jazz just desperately need like high basketball IQ. I process the game. I see the game before it happens. So I'm going to make everyone's life easier. He doesn't make that many like highlight plays, but I've talked about this on the last podcast. Like he passes the ball, and whoever catches it has a wide open shot. It's like, how is that every time the guy catches it in a spot where he's wide open? It's like, well, Topic sees it a half second, literally before the defense does, and just generates good looks. And then Rob Dillingham is the number four of this list. If we were to rank him number four, I'd probably put Dillingham fourth. He's just so little. Yeah, I just don't believe it. He's 160 pounds and 6'1". I just don't. There's not guys like that in the NBA. There just aren't. And the guys that are 6'1" are 210 pounds. They're just these little tanks that run around. He has so little. He's going to make shots. I worry about his ability to stay healthy. I know he's a dog. Like I know he has all that stuff. I just think he's too small. Who would you take?
Honestly, I think I would go with Ron Holland.
You'd go with Ron Holland?
Yeah.
I'd go with Topic.
Okay.
Either one you walk away with, I think you're happy with.
Yes.
But
definitely.
I think those are the four that are on the board. And I think like if you end up with Salon, I think you're really happy. It's like a real long-term play where the Jazz believe like this guy's physical tools are so good. He's going to get on the floor. Biggest need, I would say, is Topic and Holland. Like Holland's more of a true wing.
Yep.
I think you're going to have Tijon Salon competing with Taylor Hendricks his whole life to try and get minutes. So it's a little clunky there. And then you have a lot of small guards who need the ball in their hand with the Jazz. The nice thing about Topic is while he's a ball-in-the-hand player, like he will get off the ball because he knows it's going to come back. Yep. Like he will start the rotation, and then late in the game, he recognizes, like, I got to get mine. Like, this is a close game. I know how to score. I'm going to get downhill, or I'm going to get to my little weird. He gets these weird little runners, like left-handed. Yeah. He's like crafty shots. So I would take Topic and sit out for a year. If the Jazz ended up with Holland, I would 100% totally understand it.
Yes, honestly, if the plan is to like sit him for a year, which I assume it is, have to get him healthy, I think that could benefit him a lot. Like you see, Chet Holmgren comes in, and he probably had a better rookie season than he would have, barring his injury.
But this is a good draft. Like if you walk away in the first round with Ron Holland or Nikola Topic, both guys who I think on a lot of boards are probably like number 4.
Yes,
I think you're totally fine with that. And I almost guarantee you at least one of those guys will be there. You mentioned wanting to talk about like the worst case scenario.
Yes.
We can throw that in here really quickly.
Okay, yeah. So I was just sort of best, worst, most likely scenario for the Jazz. For worst, is it just like everyone you could want? Granted, like I'm pretty sure the Jazz, like we said, it's more about fit than best player available, and I'm sure you can find someone who will fit with the roster. But what would you say is like the worst case scenario?
Like I think it would be really tough if the Spurs took Topic at 8. We've got him taking Buzelis.
Yep.
The Trailblazers take Ron Holland at 7, and then all of a sudden the guy sitting on the board at 10 is Dillingham, Buzelis, Connect, who are like, and look, maybe the Jazz have those guys like way high on their board. They very realistically could. I'm just looking at the guys I've watched and like kind of have like trended towards thinking like I see what the thing is there. And that's the situation where you're picking between like, oh man, the Cody Williams, the Topiches, the Ron Hollands are all off the board, and you're kind of stuck with like the 23-year-old or Buzelis, which is funny. Like I'm just lower on Buzelis, and I know a lot of people are, but like universally he's at like number 5 on every draft. Yeah, you find him at number 5 every single mock draft. It's kind of funny. So those are the areas where I could see there being a real issue.
Okay, you want to go on to finish out the lottery?
Let's do it.
Okay, number 11 for the Bulls.
We'll operate under the understanding. We'll let you pick Holland. So Holland went number 11.
Okay, for the Bulls, how about Rob Dillingham? I think the Bulls are sort of going towards a rebuild here, and sort of just having someone to bring some excitement to town would be big.
I just hate their roster. I did this yesterday, and I was just like, what? They've got a bunch of guards because they have Kobe White, and they have Ayo Dosunmu, and maybe Zach LaVine plays, and maybe Lonzo Ball plays, but maybe none of those guys play.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you could draft a guard. They need a big guy. There's no big guys on the board. Unless they're going to take Zach Edey, which I wouldn't rule out. Yep. Like, I would not rule out Zach Edey being the pick here at number 11 to the Bulls. So I think that's fine. Rob Dillingham has some real scoring upside, some real kick, and I get why someone has him like 6 on their board, and Chicago does, and they say, well, he's available at 11. We're going to take him. All right, number 12 is the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'll just go with Salon. I think that's just kind of an easy pick there.
I was literally thinking the same thing. Like, okay, see, they're already so good, so why not go for like a project player? You know, hope he can turn into something amazing.
Now, I didn't think they would ever draft a point guard last year, and they ended up taking Cason Wallace in the first round with their 10th or 11th pick or whatever it was, and he's good. Now, that probably takes them out of the conversation of some of these other defensive guards that are still on the board, but man, we've got Topic falling now. You know, like that's the hard part about this draft where it really could kind of come apart for somebody.
And even though it's not the biggest need for him, I would just say that the Kings go best available and take Topic at 13.
I think that's totally fair.
Yeah.
And you get a nice big body who's a year away. You can try and go and acquire like Paul George or something this offseason if you want. So 13, Kings go with Topic, and I think that's the right pick. I just would take him.
Yep.
Big, smart, really finishes well at the rim. Not like dunks, but just gets to the rim and finishes there. And then number 14, the Portland Trail Blazers with their second pick.
Zach Edey.
Zach Edey. Yeah, really, I think it's Zach Edey. I absolutely could see that. There's rumors that they're looking at him at 7. I don't believe that, but 14. Yeah, Zach Edey rounds out. I had Zach Edey falling to 25 to the Knicks in my mock that I did yesterday. Again, it's because like, well, someone takes Kyle Filipowski over Zach Edey and Khalil Ware over, and it's like, okay, well, the big guys have just slipped. Yes. There's just not going to be that many centers taken. And but yeah, I think that's totally fair. Trailblazers take Edey at number 14. Okay.
Some other names just to look out for to sneak into the lottery. Tyler Kolek.
Okay.
Right, really good playmaker. Tristan Da Silva.
I like Da Silva a lot.
Yeah, I do as well.
From Colorado.
Jared McCain is another big one.
Yep.
And then Khalil Ware. I think those are all good names that could potentially sneak up into the lottery.
Ware was a former top 10 recruit, went to Oregon and didn't play at all, right? And then into Indiana. And actually had a really productive season. Didn't impact winning a ton, but a lot of blocks, a lot of threes. Yep. So that's the kind of things you're looking for. I could also see McCain going to the Kings at number 13. He could fit really well next to De'Aaron Fox. That would make a lot of sense as a floor spacer who can step out and really shoot the ball. All right, that's why this draft is hard. We went through that pretty quickly, but there's a lot of difficult decisions for teams to make. And realistically, though, I think the Jazz are going to end up in a spot where they have Topic and Holland on the board, and they're picking between those two. That would be my guess at this point. I'd be surprised if Cody Williams falls to 10. But again, a week ago, everyone was like, yeah, Cody Williams will be there at 13. So we don't know.
Real quick before we go into the break, we talked about worst case scenario. What would you say is best case scenario? Who's someone who you can actually see falling to the Jazz at 10, and the Jazz are like, oh wow, count our lucky stars?
I'll say Cody Williams.
Okay.
I'll say Zach Edey does jump up, or Salon jumps up. Salon goes 6 to the Hornets.
Okay.
The Spurs, the Trailblazers still take Dalton Connect because they want a ready-made guy. The Spurs then say oh well, we want shooting, so we're going to take Rob Dillingham, which I think is kind of realistic.
Yeah.
And then 9, Memphis wants a big guy and doesn't take Cody Williams because they don't want another project. And then you end up in a spot where you could have Cody Williams, Nikola Topic, and Ron Holland on the board.
Yep.
And you get to pick your favorite of the 3. I think that's best case scenario. But realistically, I think 2 of the 3 will be on the board. Best case scenario, you have your choice of all 3.
Awesome.
Okay, let's take a quick break. I know that was long. We'll come back. We will answer the rest of your mailbag questions. Stick around. More Jazz Notes coming up next. Welcome back to the Jazz Notes podcast. All right, we did the mock draft. That was pretty fun, and I think a good example of like how crazy this thing can get quickly. Even though I think we went not chalk, but relatively like the top 10 guys of the top 10 guys. I think that's pretty accurate. Okay, what's our first question?
I'm going to group a few together here that are all sort of related to some recent rumors regarding the Jazz. First up from Richard Bradford, logic behind trading Walker Kessler to draft Zach Edey. Alex says, are Ainge trade smokescreens just a thing we need to learn to live with as Jazz fans now? Or is there any actual meat on the bones of all the rumors? And then Sammy Paradise says, if the Jazz traded for Zach LaVine, what would they have to give up? I don't think he's worth much more than what we gave up for Collins. And all of these are sort of coming together after rumors came out last week that the Jazz were open to trading Walker Kessler, and they were also in active trade talks with the Bulls surrounding Zach LaVine.
Let's start quickly with the Danny Ainge thing.
Yes.
I do think that is a thing. Like, it was his reputation in Boston. He likes to be involved in trade talks. I don't think it's fake. Like, I think Danny Ainge gets in all of these conversations, and then he is so willing to be patient with what he has that he's not going to force something where maybe some other GMs or execs that feel like, hey, sometimes my job is on the line, which has not been the case for Danny Ainge for a long time. He just backs off. Mm-hmm. He's just willing to hang up the phone. Yeah. And I don't think it's like Danny's making it up or these reports are making it up. I just think Danny's willing to hang up.
Yep.
And some guys aren't.
And I think that comes down to like a smarts thing. Like he
right?
knows when he's going to be overpaying or what the right price is.
Or being underpaid, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And he waited for Donovan Mitchell and he waited for Rudy Gobert. And I bet you he hung up on those guys. So I will tell you this. I heard about the Donovan Mitchell Cavs trade. I think it ended up on like a Wednesday. I can't remember what it was, a Monday or whatever it was. It came down. The previous Friday, I had heard that trade package. I had heard Colin Sexton. I had heard, at the time, I didn't even know Ochai Agbaji because the Jazz didn't have a pick in that draft, so I hadn't paid attention at all. And Lauri Markkanen. And it had kind of been floated as an idea, but I'd heard that was one. I didn't know about all the draft picks and swaps and stuff, but I'd heard that those were kind of the pieces. And that the Jazz had said no. And the report came out that Friday, I think, that like the Cavs were out of the conversation. Because then it was focused down to like, no, it's going to be the Knicks. And then RJ Barrett got extended. It was like this whole weird thing of like, oh, well, this pulls everybody off the board. Like Danny Ainge, though, at one point hung up the phone, and really it was Justin Zanuck. Danny Ainge has the final say. Zanuck's actually on the phone. They just hung up the phone on Cleveland. Not to be mean. I mean, figuratively, they stopped listening.
Yep.
They just said, okay, you're not meeting our asking price. And when the Knicks stuff fell through, they called up Cleveland, and either the offer got upped or whatever, and the Jazz said, let's do the deal.
Yep.
So, like, these things happen. They are out there, but I do think the Jazz are willing to walk away where some teams aren't.
Yep.
So, and even in trades that do come through, sometimes they will walk away until they get more.
Yeah.
And they meet their asking price. So, all right, sorry, that was a long answer of that one as well.
No, yeah, let's just say this. There is actual meat on the bones, but the Jazz aren't starving, right? Like,
yeah, right.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Like they're not dying for whatever trade package they're going into. They're just putting their hands in all these conversations to see if they can get it for a price that they seem is fair.
Zach LaVine, I think actually you want to unload some salary if you're getting Zach LaVine back. You don't want to sacrifice your flexibility financially by acquiring Zach. You already are naturally going to do it because he's owed like $45 million every year for the next 3 years, including the player option, which I suspect he's going to pick up because he's hurt so often. So you've got to be comfortable paying him $45 to $50 million a year. So if you're doing that, you want to get off salary. And the salary I think you want to get off is John Collins and maybe Jordan Clarkson.
Yes.
But you recognize you're doing Chicago a favor. So you are taking more back from them because Jordan expires after next year, as does John Collins. So they basically get $50 million off their salary a year early with two guys who actually show up and play. And Zach LaVine, you can't always count on playing. Like I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Bulls made a trade like this, that they would actually get better without Zach LaVine just by having whatever veterans that fill the cap space. So if that's the case and they could actually get better on the floor, I think you want assets back in addition to Zach LaVine. So you get a high upside swing on a player who hasn't been great the last couple of years, and then you also want like 2 future draft picks.
Yeah.
It's not just like Rudy Gay in a second. Like you want to unload some of your stuff too and then get assets back.
I have a couple questions too with LaVine's fit in Utah. One, I think that Jordan Clarkson has to be out the door if you're bringing LaVine in because in my eyes, LaVine is just a better Jordan Clarkson in a lot of ways. And then second, I don't think you can move. Of course, this is something that happens down the line. If Keontae's a part of the long-term plan than Levine would be, but I think that you're committing to Keontae being a point guard if you're bringing Levine in.
I think that's a good point.
I don't think Levine is really doing much playmaking-wise with the ball in his hands.
Not like that.
Yes.
No, he's more of a Donovan Mitchell kind of type and not quite as even dynamic with the ball in his hands as Donovan is, and more looks to score than even Donovan did, and Donovan took 19 shots a game.
Yeah.
So, it's more of a ball in hand, and he gets some assists because he has attention on him, and he has the ball so much, but he's not like super innate playmaker. I totally agree with that. So I think you want to get assets back, unload some salary, and maybe you would do it, and even then it would have to be a pretty rich package of assets you get back. And
then let's answer this last one. What do you think about Walker Kessler being available, and if he is traded, what do you think about bringing Zach Edey in?
They're really different, which is, I think, and I'm not implying that that's what they're saying. Zach Edey, his rotation time at the rim defensively is so bad. Yep. He's just so slow. If he's standing right under the rim, being 7'5", he deters people. But if you make a quick pocket pass, he can't move quickly enough to recover. And even guys who have little floaters and jump shots, like Tyler Kolek from Marquette, kind of abused him, just being able to pull up from 6 feet, 7 feet, 8 feet and shoot over him. He's actually not. He doesn't feel 7'5" all the time as a rim protector. Walker is a truly great rim protector.
Yeah.
The question is what's going on with Walker? What was the checkout last year? Why was sometimes the effort not there? Was it that he got hurt and lost his starting spot? I understand why that'd be frustrated. He hurt his elbow, started the first 7 games, even through the elbow, came back and didn't start really at all the rest of the year.
Yeah.
If you just put him back in the starting lineup, does that work? And is he bought in again? Maybe it is. There's a sophomore slump. So I wouldn't do it just with the idea of acquiring Zach Edey.
Yeah.
If you could move up to 3, if Houston's hey, we want a big guy, we want a center to play next to Sengun, excuse me, yeah, and you wanted to have a big rim protector to help with that defense, and they want to give you 3 for 10, I would really consider Walker Kessler and 10 for number 3.
Yeah.
And go up and get Reed Shepherd or whoever you think is the third best player. I doubt that's on the board.
Yeah.
But they're talking about trading for Marcus Smart, so who knows? Who knows what's out there? That Zach Edey, the 1-for-1, I don't think is a great replacement there. All right.
Next up, from Jake the Lynx. I have heard the Jazz would like to trade John Collins. He seems like a great dude, but fit with Walker is a bit rough. I'd love to see Walker bounce back next year starting. Is there actually a realistic way to trade John? What would a reasonable potential trade even look like?
Yeah, I think there is. Yeah. It probably happens at the deadline, though. I don't think it happens in the offseason. Maybe John, is playing well enough that he looks like he's going to opt out of his deal, which makes him a $25 million expiring contract. Now, you've got to figure out if you actually want to sign him long-term, and maybe you don't trade for a guy on an expiring contract, but maybe you're trying to unload some money, and John's a good centerpiece there. I just think John feels like more of an in-season trade piece than out of season. And look, maybe some team's good and needs a little bit, conceptually a 4 that can step out and space the floor a little bit, or a backup 5 who can step out and space the floor a little bit. I actually believe that John Collins has a role in the NBA. I don't think anyone's found it particularly well yet, but he's talented enough that I think there's a role for him out there for the right team.
Question for you. Of John Collins, Walker Kessler, Jordan Clarkson, how many of them are on day 1 starting Jazz roster?
I'd say at least 2 of the 3.
2 of the 3?
Yeah, most likely 2. Just realistically, likelihood, it's hard to trade players.
Yeah.
So 2 of the 3.
Alex, question from Alex. Are players as interested in and hyped about draft night as fans are, or do they approach it with a bit of dread?
I'm assuming he's talking about existing NBA players, because the young players, the rookies, are oh my gosh, this is the best. Yeah, truly the best night of their life. So they're thrilled. I think there's a little bit of disdain, a little bit of Caitlin Clarkism of we hate these people coming in. I think that always naturally exists. Who's taking my spot? You're not taking my job. There's only 450 jobs in the NBA and 60 of you are coming. You're not going to make it.
Yeah.
And I don't believe you're going to make it. And you know what? You're not as good as I am. And the truth is they're not. Yep. There's no rookies that are better than NBA players for the most part. It's just, Jordan Clarkson's unbelievable and has been doing this for 12 years. If he doesn't believe and doesn't like the rookies coming in, I'm not saying that. I'm not reporting that.
Yes.
I'm just saying if he was skeptical of the rookies coming in trying to take his job, I totally understand that. I think there's a little skepticism always from the existing players, but also respect, understanding that they went through the exact same thing.
Yeah. I would assume it's a little bit more dread, especially for the top 5 picks, say, people who are actually supposed to come in and get playing time and make an impact. But then again, say for number 1, I'm sure Trae Young is excited to play with Sar or Zach, whoever it is. But But then again, maybe Clint Capella is like, all right, here we go. But yeah, I think that's a good question.
I bet you Rashawn Holmes is not thrilled about the idea of Alex Sarr getting drafted number 2 overall by the Wizards. Yep. He's like, well, there goes all of my playing time, and I'm already like, this is already my 4th team in 4 years. Like, it's close for me not being in the league anymore. Yep. Like, you're gonna make me move to Europe. You're gonna make me go play in China or wherever. Like, I don't want to do that. So no, I don't want you here. Marvin Bagley doesn't want this next crop of big guys to come in and play for the Wizards. So those are the guys who aren't excited.
Yeah. Next up from Cam Young, does the Jazz's loaded Summer League roster and 3 2024 picks make it harder for us to grab quality undrafted free agents two-way contracts?
It's a little bit of an oxymoron. I don't know how many quality undrafted free agents there are. Maybe a little bit. Yeah, probably a little bit. I wish I don't know who's going to go undrafted. And it's like, if you're going undrafted, like you're Trent Forrest.
Yeah.
Which I liked Trent Forrest. He was fun. He was Trent Forrest. Like, he's been on a 2-way contract his entire NBA career. So maybe it's harder to sign some of those guys if they just say, well, they just drafted, Ron Holland at number 10 and drafted Ryan Dunn at number 29.
Yeah.
We're not going to have our wing sign there. There's no chance you're ever going to play. So maybe, but you're talking about are the food scraps worse in the, bathroom than they are in the dumpster? It's like, yeah, they're both bad. I don't want to eat either of them. So, with all due respect to undrafted free agents, rooting for you guys.
Last question here from Holly Hardy. Are we going to try and keep Chris Dunn?
I think there'll be interest there.
Yeah.
But, to what end?
Yep.
Justin Zanuck yesterday had his media availability and kind of said, he still clearly believes that Keontae can be a point guard. And Colin Sexton showed a little bit of a willingness and, ability to be a point guard, averaging 5 assists over the last 50 games of the season. They might draft a point guard. If you draft Topic, maybe if you draft Topic, maybe that's the situation.
Yeah.
You sign Chris for 1 more year. You give him a little bit more than the vet minimum, and then he's a trade piece for you. I wouldn't look. We've just kind of assumed that Topic would take the whole year off. Like, Joe Ingles tore his ACL in February. He's 1 trillion years old and was back on the floor in December.
Yeah.
Well, we know the initial injury for Topic happened in January. He re-injured it in March, but okay, so bring him back at the trade deadline. That's what the Jazz do with all their rookies. Their rookies don't play until the trade deadline. Fine. That's what happened last year with Bryce Sensabaugh. He says, yeah, I'm on the ACL injury too, but wasn't that hurt. So I could see that happening.
Yeah.
I'm not ruling out that Topic couldn't play at all in his first year. And you may want to get him some of that experience so he doesn't come in as a true rookie the next year. Maybe you give him an opportunity to play 15, 20 games down the season to see what he can do and what he needs to work on. So, and then maybe, you sign Chris Dunn for $5 or $6 million, more than the Suns can offer him or the Bucks can offer him, and then you trade him at the deadline to a team that needs Chris Dunn, like the Phoenix Suns or the Milwaukee Bucks, and you say, can I get a 2nd-round draft pick from you or 2 second-round draft picks from you? That's just good work, and that's where I don't think Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck let assets leave for nothing. Mm-hmm. So pay him a little bit extra and then trade him later.
Related, unrelated, before we end off here, if the Jazz can trade up, I would say that maybe the best case scenario for them is drafting Stephon Castle.
Okay.
Right? Because I think that of course he can work on his shooting and playmaking a bit, but the Jazz desperately need good perimeter defenders. And I think that there's not really a better option than that than Castle. He's
got some star upside. Again, I'm always jaded at this point. I was listening to Zach Lowe and Jonathan Givony talking on their mock draft or their podcast today on the way over here. And Jonathan Givony was like, I drove to every UConn game and I sat there for 2 hours before so I could film Steph Castle make 3 or 4 threes in a row. He's like, sometimes it would take a half an hour in between 2 makes. It's like, ugh. Can you not shoot at all? And maybe he can't. There are guys who can't shoot.
Yeah.
There are guys who truly cannot shoot. And even if they start knocking him down at a higher percentage, talking about Chris Dunn, it's like nobody respects Chris Dunn's shooting.
Yep.
I don't care that he shoots 38%. His defensive player is usually a center in the paint who just says, fine, Chris, beat us with threes. You're never going to hit 6 in a game to beat us. So there is some fear there with Steph Castle. Absolutely there is. And you know what? That applies to Topic too. Topic, he averaged 1 made 3 a game, but he only shot 30%. He wasn't on fire. That's got to develop. He's got to learn to hit that 3. And if he doesn't, then you've got a little bit of a Ricky Rubio situation without the defense. It's like, what's Ricky Rubio without the defense? Not a whole lot there.
Yeah.
So that's why this draft is so difficult. You're betting on a couple of guys really fixing their flaws. Mm-hmm. And you've got to figure out which guy you think is most capable and has the shooting form or has all the other intangibles that will allow them to fix their problems. You want to make a prediction? Who the Jazz draft tomorrow? Number 10. Who do they pick?
You know what? Let's go with our prediction, Ron Holland.
Okay, I'll go with Topic.
Okay,
we'll see who's right.
Okay.
We'll talk about this next week.
Yes.
And then they're going to make one of those two 29th or 32nd picks.
Okay,
they're not going to. I don't think they trade both of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think they add at least one more player, and maybe it's a draft and stash guy.
Yeah.
Maybe they trade those up to get Zach Edey or something goofy. But they're gonna make one more pick. It's not just gonna be a one pick draft, especially if Topic isn't gonna play next year.
Yes,
that gives you a lot of room to draft another guy as well.
If they are trading one of those picks, do you think it's to move up in the draft? Do you think it's for a player? Do you think it's for future draft picks?
I actually don't think it. I've teased a lot of the idea of packaging 29 and 32 to move up. Mm-hmm. It's like I might want to really move up if I'm going to do that. Like I don't know if 23 from Phoenix is enough. Like 6 picks in the 20s.
Yeah.
I get it if there's like the year Tyrese Maxey was in the draft,
mm-hmm.
like I loved him coming out, and I'm just tapping myself on the back. Like I remember he was the first guy I watched, and I was like, oh, I don't care that the Jazz have Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley and Jordan Clarkson. Like if you are going to build towards the future, like this is a guy you can have on your team. And now he's way better. I didn't expect him to be an all-star by his whatever 4th season in the NBA. He's better than I expected, but I loved him coming out of Kentucky. If that guy is there, who you absolutely know is going to make it, like you think is going to hit, trade up and get him. Mm-hmm. Absolutely trade up and get him. If he's at 23, fine, and that's where he is on the board, and that's where you have to get to, do it. If you're just like, well, we kind of like the guy, and he was 14th on our board, now he's there at 23, like, we kind of like him, I wouldn't do it in that case. I would say you're better off taking 2 swings at 29 and 32 and hoping you've got a 50-50 shot of those guys turning into something, and you have 2 of those, the math is better than one 60-40 shot that your guy at 23 makes it. So if there's a guy you absolutely love, you can't believe is on the board, definitely do it. If not, take both or trade it for a future draft pick that has maintained some of that traded value.
Thank you guys for tuning into the Jazz Notes podcast. We will be back next week with at least one new player on the Jazz roster. We'll talk about all things NBA draft and then keep on going in the NBA offseason.
Find us on Twitter at Ben's Hoops, Chandler Holt, KSL, and of course read us at KSL Sports, KSLSports.com. Sign up for the Jazz Notes newsletter, though we got to send this out because this isn't going to last very long. This doesn't have a lot of shelf life with the draft coming up tomorrow, so we'll get this out to you quickly. And if you're listening, it's already happened. Thanks. More Jazz Notes coming up next week.